Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, Senator. Okay, if we can bring the prime sponsor, Wendy Thomas. Good afternoon, Representative. How are you doing today? Doing good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I am Wendy Thomas and I represent the town of Merrimack. I'm here to introduce House Bill 51, which is an act relative to hemp-derived cannabinoids and the definition of cannabis in therapeutic cannabis. Essentially, this bill would allow ATCs, which are alternative treatment centers, to buy non-intoxicating cannabinoids from federally legal hemp producers and utilize them in some of the products that they use for patients in New Hampshire. Just so that we are clear, the bill would not apply to hemp-derived THC products, which are not legal in New Hampshire. It would only apply to CBD and other non-intoxicating cannabinoids derived from hemp, and this would be regulated by DHHS. The way the law is currently written, an ATC must produce all of its own cannabinoids in-house. This makes sense when the law was originally passed in 2013, but today hemp is federally legal, and there are many legal suppliers of CBD and other non-intoxicating cannabinoids. Access to these federally legal hemp products would enable ATCs to produce some of their products less expensively, which should result in these products becoming more affordable for New Hampshire patients. Many therapeutic cannabis patients actively seek out products that are higher in CBD and other non-intoxicating cannabinoids as a way to manage their symptoms. House Bill 51 addresses the need for therapeutic dispensaries to access a broader range of cannabis-derived products that can be used to support medical treatments while also ensuring regulatory oversight and safety. By expanding the definition of, quote, cannabis to include non-intoxicating cannabinoids such as CBD and other hemp-derived compounds, the bill provides ATCs with the opportunity to incorporate a wider variety of therapeutic products. This is particularly beneficial for patients seeking specific cannabinoids that may be less likely to cause psychoactive effects, but still provide relief from conditions like chronic pain, anxiety, or seizures. The bill ensures that these hemp-derived cannabinoids and any cannabis concentrates or infused products manufactured from them undergo testing for contaminants and cannabinoid profiles. This helps maintain high standards for patient safety and product consistency. Additionally, the provision prohibiting the use of hemp-derived products containing THC over 0.3% ensures that these therapeutic products remain non-intoxicating, aligning with the therapeutic purpose of the dispensaries. Overall, this legislation allows dispensaries to offer a more diverse range of products, ultimately improving patient access to the most appropriate and effective treatments. It strikes the balance between expanding therapeutic options and maintaining strict regulatory control to safeguard public health and the integrity of the medical cannabis program. Thank you, and I will take any questions.
Thank you very much, Representative. Do we have any questions? Go ahead, Sandra.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative, for bringing this forward and for taking my question. I just want to go back to something you said at the beginning of your testimony that to clarify that indeed this would be products that are already regulated, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And secondly, that they are strictly under what we now have in RSA 126, that they are for therapeutic uses only, correct? correct?
They would be used strictly by the ATCs.
By the ATCs, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you.
Pat Sullivan. Good afternoon, Chief. How you doing?
Good afternoon, Senator Gain, member of the committee. Name is Pat Sullivan. I represent the New Hampshire Association of Chiefs of Police. Just a few, couple concerns that the chiefs have. We have a concern about the transportation between the states on this. And we believe it's just a simple expansion of the marijuana legalization effort. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question, Chief?
Certainly.
So they had said it's, what this product is federally legal, the hemp product. So how is that transporting over
As
to
I
the state?
read-
How is that illegal?
Well, as I read under the new paragraph, it talks about the manufacture of cannabis concentrate and cannabis infused products. So I understand that this is to make that, but again, it's just an ongoing process.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Any other questions, sir? Okay, thank you, sir. Rep. Jerry Nurk. Nurk. Okay. As long as they call you on time for dinner, right?
Exactly. I was going to use that. I was
Something
going to
like
use that line. Yeah. Call me anything. Just don't call me late for dinner. So thank you very much. And for the record, my name is Jerry Knirk, and I am the chair of the Therapeutic Cannabis Medical Oversight Board. And that board is statutorily charged with medical oversight of the New Hampshire Therapeutic Cannabis Program. It's composed of 10 medical providers, different medical specialties, and a therapeutic cannabis patient, medical director, DHHS, and a clinical representative of an ATC. TCMOB voted 7-0 to support HB 51, and it passed the House House HHSEA 17-0, and passed the House on consent. The point is that cannabis is a complex herb with over 70 cannabinoids and over 450 other chemical constituents. THC is the commonly known intoxicating cannabinoid, but there are many non-intoxicating cannabinoids as well, including CBD, which is the most commonly known, which have a therapeutic benefit for patients. In therapeutic cannabis, becoming intoxicated or high is actually an undesirable side effect. And that's why we start low and go slow, because we don't want intoxication. ATCs sell many products that contain low concentrations of THC. As a result, they have a significant need for CBD and for other non-intoxicating cannabinoids to be able to be used in their products. But they have difficulty producing enough CBD and other non-intoxicating cannabinoids secondary to the significant costs of growing the product due to the security safeguards necessitated by the intoxicating nature of THC, which is in much of what they do grow. So yes, the 2018 Farm Bill is what legalized hemp and made non-intoxicating cannabinoids federally legal when they are derived from industrial hemp, which is defined as cannabis with a concentration of THC below 0.3%. That is cannabis which will not make you high. So since industrial hemp can be grown commercially just out in a field without the high level of security, it's a very good economical source for CBD and other non-intoxicating cannabinoids. This bill would allow the ATCs to purchase and use CBD and other hemp-derived non-intoxicating cannabinoids obtained from commercial producers in the manufacture of cannabis concentrates and cannabis-infused products. That would allow the ATCs to have more CBD products available at a lower cost to the patients, and given the great need for CBD-rich products, that would be beneficial. I'd like to address the transportation issue. The only transportation crossing state lines would be of the industrial hemp, which is federally legal and therefore does not violate the federal laws about interstate transportation. Once they reach the ATC and they formulate it into a cannabis-infused product or a concentrate, it would be sold within the state of New Hampshire, because our ATCs are New Hampshire ATCs. They produce and sell within the state. So there will be no interstate transportation of anything which is federally illegal. It would only be the federally legal low THC, less than 0.3%, that would be crossing state lines. So in summary, the purpose of this bill is to allow ATCs to have more economical access to non-intoxicating cannabinoids, which are federally legal, to be used in producing products that contain non-intoxicating cannabinoids to meet patient needs. So we would appreciate it if you would pass HB 51. And I'll be glad to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. How are we doing? Go ahead, Sandra.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, the Honorable Jerry Knirk, MD. Would you mind going back to the bit in your testimony about the transportation issue that was raised a little bit earlier? How we would be in compliance with federal law in order to bring this product to our ATCs? Just reread that bit.
As best I understand, and again, industrial hemp, which this is defined as containing THC less than 0.3. I mean, when you're growing industrial hemp, you have to test it. And if a field has a higher THC concentrate than that, it has to be destroyed. So, I mean, so the point is, it has not got THC, and then to be able to transport it, because it's federally legal, it is federally legal to cross a state line. Because, I mean, this is an issue if you, if we have a person who goes over to Maine to a dispensary, they may be a therapeutic cannabis patient, but realistically, if they buy it in Maine across the state line, they're violating federal law because that has THC. But once it gets here in the state, and obviously there may be some ATC people who are going to speak to this, but my understanding is it'll all be used to then produce a cannabis-infused product that would then be sold in the state. So it may have, that product may have more THC, but it's not crossing a state line.
Thank you very much.
Sure thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. If it is a legal product, that the federal government has declared it a legal product, why do we need anybody's permission to bring it into the state of New Hampshire?
We have to have permission. We have to change the statute to allow the ATCs to use something that they haven't grown in making their cannabis-infused products. Because currently they have to grow with everything they use.
But it's a legal product.
But it is a legal product under the 2018 Farm Bill.
Thank you.
I think I'm there too. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. Matt Simon. Afternoon, Mr. Simon. How are you doing today?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
Good to see you. Senators, for the record, Matt Simon. I work for Granite Leaf Cannabis. We are one of the alternative treatment centers. We operate dispensaries in Chichester and Merrimack. And we support this bill. The previous speakers did a great job, so I don't have a whole lot to add. I'm here primarily as a resource. I can tell you that the ATCs already produce products that are either purely CBD products or are what we call CBD ratio products. A lot of the medical research into cannabis has focused on non-intoxicating cannabinoids and their use either alone or with THC as part of a ratio. A lot of the most promising research has in fact been into cannabinoids combined together as part of an entourage effect. That's the term the researchers use. So a lot of medical providers are asking, recommending to their patients and recommending to us as a company that we offer more CBD products, more CBD ratio products. So for example, we offer capsules, tinctures, fruit chews, all of which come in a CBD only version or a CBD THC ratio version. So equal parts THC and CBD. And we have a few others that come in different ratios and have a couple of other cannabinoids. The issue is that it's very difficult for us to produce CBD and other cannabinoids other than THC. We have to grow under high intensity lights indoors, and that is extremely cost imposing. And meanwhile, these products are already legal and widely available. So hemp is federally legal, this unambiguously legal under federal law. There's a lot of ambiguity, as I've discussed with this committee in the past, about hemp-derived THC. That is a completely separate issue from what we're dealing with here. This bill is very strictly limited to non-intoxicating cannabinoids. Any THC variant would not be included. But this would allow us to buy CBD from hemp markets, have it independently lab tested, and that is a key piece because yes, hemp is federally legal, but it is not federally regulated, and states for the most part are not regulating these products. So people can get online and have them mail ordered to their house. You can buy them at stores in New Hampshire. Not regulated products. If they have been lab tested, it was voluntarily, and there's nobody checking those labels to make sure they're entirely accurate. So what we'd be doing would be selling products to patients using lab-tested hemp-derived non-intoxicating cannabinoids. We believe we'd be able to lower prices for those products, and that would make patients happy, it would make medical providers happy, and it would not create any new risks for New Hampshire. Be happy to take any questions.
It's pretty clear, I think. So again, Senator Reardon, I think, spelled it out. So right now you can grow it in-house. You want to bring it in from out of state because it'll be cheaper, it'll be tested and everything. You can't do that currently.
We can and do.
Oh, you do bring it in from out of state?
No.
Not from out of state.
RSA 126X is very specific. Any cannabinoid that we sell, we have to have grown it.
Okay.
And that's what we're trying to change here.
That's what I thought. Okay, I'm all set. And I think they are too. Thank you very much.
Thank
Good to see
you.
Alicia Bennett. Thank you. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Got it. Good afternoon. My name is Alicia Bennett, and I am here to express my full support of HB 51. While I work as the Education and Outreach Coordinator for Granite Leaf Cannabis, I am here today as a patient. I have been a registered patient in the therapeutic cannabis program since 2018. I am a cancer survivor and an arm amputee with several other conditions. Cannabis has been life-changing for me and has improved my health significantly since I've been a part of the program. I strongly believe that this bill would greatly benefit therapeutic cannabis patients in the state of New Hampshire. I have personally used hemp-derived products with both CBD, CBG, and CBN in combination with THC to help with my symptoms. These cannabinoids have several benefits for various conditions, but I want to highlight how they have helped me. CBD in combination with THC has helped my anxiety, both in the form of edibles and tinctures. CBG has helped with its neuroprotective benefits, inflammation, and pain relief, which for me is something I deal with on a daily basis. THC in combination with CBN, which is not a product that is currently readily available in any of the New Hampshire dispensaries, is very helpful for me for sleep and helps with my insomnia. This bill would make these cannabinoids more affordable and accessible for patients like me in New Hampshire. Thank you for your time. I'm open to any questions you might have.
Nope, seeing none. Have a good day. Sue Hamala. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity. I'm here. My name is Sue Hummel. I'm here with Smart Approaches to Marijuana. We oppose this bill, and we do want to raise some legal issues, actually, that aren't being concerned at the very basic level. The Agriculture Improvement Act, the 2018 Farm Bill, actually authorized the production of industrial hemp, and it classified hemp as a regulated industrial commodity. And it had a provision to remove hemp and hemp seeds from the Drug Enforcement Administration list of controlled substances. In 2022, the DEA released a letter stating that seeds containing less than 0.3% THC meet the definition of hemp and are not considered a controlled substance under federal law. However, industrial hemp and other products intended for consumption are not the same product, and there is still an issue regarding the source rule. The source rule is a legal theory used to establish the legality of cannabis material based off its source, because this changes if the seed is used for industrial purposes or human consumption. With regard to the source rule, it is understood that if material comes from industrial hemp, it is legal, but if it comes from marijuana, even if the material contains less than 0.3% THC, it is still considered a controlled substance. According to the same legal theory, the source rule, according to some, the source rule has become less applicable with regard to the seed legality of hemp after the DEA letter. However, the source rule remains in effect with regard to the context of hemp cultivation and processing of products intended for human consumption. Of important note, the 2022 seed letter does not exempt states from having a chain of title for hemp or hemp material they produce or handle. Many states have a USDA-approved state plan to regulate the processing of hemp and the production of finished products, to include products intended for human consumption. These plans also outline the state's hemp sourcing policies to ensure that the source rule is being followed legally. Currently, New Hampshire does not have a USDA-approved state plan for hemp production. It only has a USDA hemp producer's license. Lastly, the federal law still uses terms such as hemp and marijuana in U.S. federal code language. Cannabis is only referred to as a classification of plant. New Hampshire uses the term cannabis, which is dissimilar to the term marijuana under federal law. The 2022 DEA seed letter clarifies the definition of hemp seed by using terms dissimilar to federal definitions, then using the DEA seed letter to justify the exemption of a seed from the definition of cannabis in New Hampshire's legislative framework is a bit confusing. Overall, another thing is that the issue that industrial hemp definition or definition of hemp seed combined with this letter does not give the states free rein to exempt cannabis seed intended for human consumption from being considered as a controlled substance. SAM recommendation is to actually have a USDA approved plan for hemp production before it moves forward with starting to change definitions of things, and also to consider aligning state definitions with federal definitions for more applicable, for more application towards clarification for making new laws. So we do not support this effort at this time, and we really feel like there's other things that can be done ahead of that time to create a more clear framework, and then the seed issue can be addressed. Are there any questions?
Okay, put the paper down. Just start again for me. We're going to go over the whole thing, what you just said. That's the way I did it in law school. So walk me through why it isn't legal.
I'm not saying that it's not legal. I'm saying there are legal issues to this, that it's not as clear. I know we've had other speakers say, well, it's federally legal. Well, yes, in some regards, because the 2018 Farm Bill was intended to allow for industrial hemp to be used. When this bill, after this bill got passed, there was a glut of CBD on the market. That CBD on the market actually led to the Delta 9 and Delta 8 crises that we've had across the country, making these synthetic THC products in gas stations and stores that our legislature has dealt with. In 2022, the DEA issued a clarification letter about seeds, and it gave the impression to a lot of states that the seed, all seed, can be exempt. But there is still something called the source rule, and the source rule is the legal theory that that the judicial framework has used to say that we still have to source, we still have to document and record how we're sourcing things. But the source rule is really it's intended. This whole DEA letter and this whole 2018 Farm Bill is intended for industrial hemp. When you talk about products under the source rule, there are still considerations that any product off of a plant, even if it's less than 0.3% THC, if it's intended for human consumption, might not fall under that free-for-all that you can just say it's legal. There's still considerations to be had. So I'm merely just trying to highlight that it's not as simple as we're led to believe. And another thing that's difficult and kind of confusing with this particular bill is that we don't have similar definitions for things. So we're actually playing apples to oranges constantly when we're trying to make these, we're trying to align, say, oh no, federal rule says that we can do this now. Well, we don't have the same definitions. So cannabis, according to, federal law, federal US code, is the plant. We have the Cannabis Medical Oversight Program, which is intended really the same definition as they would consider marijuana. So because we call cannabis, we have this overall, term cannabis versus breaking it into hemp and marijuana, which we do in some of our legal code as well here in the state, but we're using dissimilar terms, and we're trying to apply DEA rule letters to justify changing something at this time. But there is a concern that we don't have in the state of New Hampshire. We do not have a USDA approved plan. They're called the USDA approved plan for hemp production. If we were really serious about making it clean and clear, we would actually move forward to get a USDA approved hemp plan, and we wouldn't just have a hemp producer license.
Senator? Any questions? Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
testimony. Appreciate it. Dr. Joe Hannon. Joe, you always look different. I don't know if you're going to have a ponytail, clean cut. It's just one year to another.
I don't want them to track me down. I'm kidding. Thank you for listening to me today, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Just give me one moment, sorry. Okay. I rise in strong support of HB 51 because it represents a necessary step in both consumer protection and regulatory modernization. As I view this bill as a way to ensure clarity, consistency, and safety in the therapeutic cannabis space. The current ambiguity surrounding some hemp-derived cannabinoids has created confusion for patients, law enforcement, and retailers alike. While these compounds are technically legal under federal law, their unregulated sale in gas stations and smoke shops may pose a public health risk. That's why they were banned in New Hampshire. These substances have not been held to the same testing and labeling standards as cannabis products sold through the therapeutic cannabis program in New Hampshire. This bill ensures that any cannabinoids, regardless of source, is subject to regulatory structure that protects patients and consumers. This is a matter of public health, especially for vulnerable individuals who rely on therapeutic cannabis and expect clarity in what they are consuming. Moreover, the bill clarifies definitions within the therapeutic cannabis program, ensuring it remains compliant with federal law while functioning effectively under state guidance. This improves confidence in the system and prevents exploitation by bad actors. This bill is not about restricting access, it's about safe access. It's about bringing the same oversight and standards to all cannabinoids, no matter how they're derived. That is both reasonable and responsible policy. I urge you to vote ought to pass on HB 51. And if you have any questions about the rule that was just discussed, I'd be happy to answer those too.
Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. On lines 20 to 23, I certainly can understand why that language is there for the natural THC, but why would an ATC have any situation where there's any level of a synthetic version of THC?
What do you mean?
Well, this would allow them to sell a product that has a minimal amount of synthetic THC, basically Delta 9, the chemical version of THC. Why would we? Well, yes, but it says that, but it would allow it if it's below the 0.3%. I'm just saying, I understand that's not a lot but why would there be any scenario where any amount of a synthetic version of THC is being sold at a ATC?
I don't know, and it states clearly that it's not allowed in this bill, so I don't think it's even relevant.
Well, if I may do a follow-up.
Follow.
On line 21, it says, which contains natural or synthetic THC greater than 0.3%, and on a dry weight basis. And I understand the natural form of THC, but if we're talking about an alternative treatment center Why would we, under any scenario, allow them to sell a product as any amount of the synthetic version?
We're not. I'm confused. I'm not sure what it means. I mean, am I wrong?
Am I reading the number?
I think you're in here. Do you have the bill in front of you?
I'm looking right at it, line 20,
Okay.
21, 22. Shall not use products that are derived from hemp which contain natural synthetic THC greater than 3.3% dry weight basis. So they can't use it, but they can add those non-intoxicating hemp-derived products to other things. They could make a hybrid mixture. Now, these are for sale in dispensaries only. We're not talking about allowing that somewhere else. We're saying that they're going to be used by these treatment centers as additives or parts of making something that may be different, or used as a standalone substance as an individual cannabinoid or groups. Now, there are a lot of different cannabinoids out there, as we heard Dr. Knurk talk about earlier. That doesn't mean that any of them are necessarily intoxicating. This specifically says they're not. It doesn't mean that the dispensary can't add a non-hemp derived cannabis product like THC to the product in a dispensary. It just gives them the ability to add things that they are not able to get as readily or as cheaply or as safely unless they grow them themselves, which is not economically feasible for the small businesses that we do have in New Hampshire operating for the benefit of therapeutic patients.
So, just let's follow. So your interpretation of that line is that if it had, let's say, 0.1% of synthetic THC, that the ATC would still not be allowed to sell that?
If it was synthetic THC derived from hemp-derived products, that's what this would address. I don't think it addresses synthetic products that are from non-hemp derived products like, THC greater than, but there's also, I don't see a reason why they would even need to make a synthetic version when they have natural versions that they're already currently growing. That's not the issue. The issue is getting these other properties that are used medicinally in patients to treat different conditions. Not all of them are the same. You can't just say, okay, this is a joint. It's not, don't jump on me. And you can't just say this is a joint and it's going to treat everybody the same. All your health problems are just going to magically go away. I don't know anybody that's come in here and said that from a reputable standpoint. But if someone needs something for specific conditions, this allows that to take place. And that is a vastly underserved need, especially in a small market like New Hampshire. Larger states may be easier for large operations to grow and have excess product that they can make other cannabinoid products that are not THC based, but the demand is pretty high. And the fact that some people prefer ratios that are much higher than 1-to-1 or even 2 or 3-to-1, they may be 5 or 10-to-1 in some cases, or even 50-to-1. It's not uncommon for some people to not want intoxicating effects of cannabis, especially if they are in the medical area and taking it for medical reasons. The goal is to give just enough to treat the condition without getting other effects necessarily. Now, if they occur because they're necessary for pain management or other conditions, that's a different discussion. But you have to say that people that have these conditions should have the right to have them more accessible to them and safer by allowing testing. And this is something that allows testing. If you want to keep it free for all and let them sell these things in other stores and other areas without allowing medical patients to have access, that's up to you, but it doesn't make sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hinn.
Any questions about the source rule? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, the Honorable Dr. Hannah, for taking my question. So I want to go into what my colleague was talking about in lines 20 and 21, and I think that this is language that we already have in statute in 439. So it would be adding what we already have in statute to this new paragraph. Is that not correct?
That's what I understand.
Okay, so we're not, follow up. So we're not we're not creating any new definitions, and what is currently in statute is not using products that are derived from hemp which contain natural or synthetic is the way of describing ingredients, and we already have that in statute. So that's already we've got that, and we're putting it into another space into 126.
Yes,
Is that how you, okay.
that's
thank
how I
you.
understand it.
Okay,
We
Thank
could be
you.
wrong, but I doubt we're both wrong.
okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Hill.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to testify who didn't check off testify? Seeing none, that'll end the hearing. Representative Thomas, want to come on down? You're the next contestant. I wish it was The Price is Right. You'd get prizes.
Well, it's been ages since I last saw you guys. For the record, I am Wendy Thomas and I represent the town of Merrimack. I'm here to introduce House Bill 53, an act permitting qualifying patients and designated caregivers to cultivate cannabis for therapeutic use. For full disclosure, I am a New Hampshire therapeutic cannabis patient. I use cannabis on a daily basis for pain and cancer-related illness. I'm here to introduce House Bill 53. And this is not the first rodeo for this bill. Similar bills have been passed by this House in 2021, 2023, and 2024, and we can now add 2025. Why do we need this bill? Cannabis is not covered by insurance. If you are a patient who uses a lot to keep your symptoms under control, it can be expensive. And remember, this is a vulnerable population. Many of us are unable to hold jobs. House Bill 53 helps low-income, immobile, or homebound patients who need medical cannabis to be able to grow their own medicine or get help doing so. There are 7 dispensaries in all of New Hampshire. Not all patients have cars or an affordable way to get to them. Just to put that in perspective, in my town alone, we have 5 pharmacies if I need help with pain. As I said, there were 7 in New Hampshire. Some people have to travel over an hour to get to a dispensary. Everyone reacts differently to cannabis strains. What may work for one person might not be as effective for another person. Sometimes the strain that works best for you might be discontinued. Growing it would be a good option. The New Hampshire Therapeutic Cannabis Program began in 2013. It is 12 years old. Since it began, we have learned about the program and patients' needs. Dispensaries have been added along with more qualifications to get into the program, and the program has been modified to better suit patients' needs. Just a little bit of history here. Since 2009, the New Hampshire House has consistently supported bills allowing patients with qualifying medical conditions and their caregivers to cultivate a limited supply of cannabis. In 2012 and 2019, the Senate agreed, advancing home grow legislation to the governor's desk. Both bills were vetoed and the override efforts fell short in the Senate. In 2020, the Senate passed a home grow bill in a voice vote, but the outbreak of COVID-19 prevented it from being considered in the House. Last term, it made it to the Senate twice. This term, it has recently passed the House. What this bill does, House Bill 53 allows New Hampshire therapeutic cannabis patients or caregivers to grow their own cannabis plants at their place of residence within guardrails set forward by this bill. Patients are still bound by the guidelines of the program as identified when you submit or renew your application. If grown outside, the plants cannot be viewed from another private property. It would allow New Hampshire therapeutic cannabis patients to have and grow 3 mature, which are flowering plants, 3 immature or non-flowering plants, and 12 seedlings, which are 6 inches or less. Patients can grow the plants from seeds, and some of the dispensaries have said that they would be willing to provide seedlings. The plants must be kept in a locked and secured location that is reported to the state. The patient must ensure that the plants are secure from unauthorized access. Patients would have access to state labs for testing of cannabinoids and possible contamination. What this bill does not do, this bill does not mean that every therapeutic cannabis patient will start growing plants. Some patients will try and then realize it's too much work and will stop. Some patients will be interested and will simply gather information on how to grow cannabis plants. And some patients will simply say, I'd rather buy the flower. HB 53 does not create dealers or suppliers. The therapeutic cannabis program is self-regulating. To be in the program, you must sign a contract that stipulates limitations on how much cannabis we can have, where we can keep it, and how and where we can use it. We know that if we disregard these conditions, we can be kicked out of the program, or we will be penalized at a higher rate than others. No patient is going to risk that. Again, this is not recreation. This is a medical program for very sick patients. It does not create hidden stashes of cannabis. Growth locations must be reported to the state. So what's happening in the other states? In Connecticut, you're allowed up to 3 mature plants and 3 immature plants. In Maine, you're allowed up to 6 flowering plants, 12 immature plants, and unlimited seedlings. In Massachusetts, you're allowed up to 6 plants per person or patient, no more than 12. In Rhode Island, you can have up to 12 mature plants and 12 immature plants per patient. In Vermont, you're allowed up to 2 mature plants and 7 immature plants per patient. So who supports this bill? This is a bipartisan bill that continually passes the House and recently passed the House this year once again. The dispensaries support home grow and are ready to roll out classes and resources on how to grow and may even offer some equipment needed to grow. The Therapeutic Cannabis Board, which you'll be hearing from, voted unanimously to support this bill. It is seen as an economical way to support therapeutic cannabis patients. So in summary, the New Hampshire Therapeutic Program has been alive and well since 2013 and is only getting stronger as we listen to patients' needs. House Bill 53 is a compassionate, humane bill that also encourages business growth. It's time to let patients take more control of their health and wallets by allowing for home growth in the therapeutic program. I'm happy to take any questions.
Just a quick question. So
Sure.
if you're growing your 3 plants outside that you'd mentioned, how would you keep that, under your control? How would you not become the popular yard in the neighborhood for teenagers?
So you're talking specifically if you grow outside?
Yeah, you had mentioned that, so
Right. So I'll just use my example. If I decided to grow, I would have a fenced in and locked area where the plants are outside. Most people are probably going to grow inside because of the weather conditions in New Hampshire.
thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead, Cindy. I'll look more
Thank
to
you,
my
Ms.
right.
No worries. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative, for taking my question. In reviewing the legislation, I just wanted to just confirm with you that if somebody were to choose to grow outside, like we just talked about, it has to be in a fenced-in or greenhouse locked area.
Correct.
Otherwise locked inside their home as well.
Correct.
And in the event of being a renter, I understand that was, you cannot do that in a rental property. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's only for homeowners, really,
Property owners. Well, yeah.
property owners.
Yeah.
So people who have medicinal, have the diagnosis, the card, and then have to register with the state to get permission to have a locked facility, either inside or outside their home, if they own their home.
Correct.
So very small.
Very small. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure if I heard this correctly, but you believe that a plant that's grown outside would have to be in a locked or fenced-in area?
Mhm.
Where does it say? I'm not sure where it says that. I thought regulations are on page 2, lines 10 to 23, but
I don't have a copy of the bill with me.
that's
18.
Page 2, line 18.
18.
It's page 2, line
You
18.
lock it in. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay,
You're all set. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.
Sue Homella.
Hello, this is Sue Hamola. Thank you for taking my testimony, representing Sam, New Hampshire.
Can you speak up? I'm sorry.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Sue Hamola, representing Sam, New Hampshire. Just to be clear, as I read this bill on line 5, it says, just to go back before I get in my testimony about rental properties, a qualifying patient may use and qualify, a qualifying patient may use, and a qualifying patient or designated caregiver may cultivate cannabis on a privately owned real property only with written permission of the property owner, or in the case of a leased property, with the permission of the tenant in possession of the property, except that a tenant shall not allow a qualifying patient to smoke cannabis on rental property if it violates the lease. To me, that's not necessarily clear that it's only the person who owns the home is allowing this. The one thing I wanted to, Sam, New Hampshire does not support this bill. This bill is very well-meaning, and it with regard to medical marijuana users who live far from ATCs and who may struggle with the cost of the product. But let's be clear about what this bill does authorize. Regardless of how many people may choose to grow this plant or not, this bill authorizes every card holder to grow marijuana. That's what the bill authorized. And it allows them to grow it while they're indoors or outdoors. That's their prerogative. But the problem with this bill is that it comes with absolutely no mechanism for oversight. Currently, the state's therapeutic cannabis program does not have the bandwidth or resources to maintain a list of caregiver growers, enforce whether or not the marijuana grower is only producing enough product for one of their 5 potential possible legal medical marijuana caregiving patients, or ensure that they're not producing more than the authorized ounces of usable marijuana. And there's no mechanism to ensure that they're not making more than $500 in annual sales. There's no mechanism. We could put in 50 different rules in this bill, but there's absolutely no mechanism for the oversight of them. Also, the bill language doesn't include any kind of language that would address non-financial in-kind barter payments, which may allow potential malfeasance of product sales. In addition, this bill also clarifies that the names of individuals enrolled in the state's cannabis program will not be disclosed by the agency. So if a law enforcement agency has concerns about a residence, they must submit a sworn affidavit, which must include the grower's name and date of birth, and then the agency may confirm if they are a designated caregiver or a designated grower. The state is not compelled to give this information to law enforcement at all. In addition, any warrants law enforcement may have are protected from 91A protections under the bill language. So even if the neighbors of an illegal growing operation will have no idea if there's any documented criminal activity in their close proximity. Also, if a person violates this bill by growing more marijuana than allowed or selling it to 4 of their other potential 5 medical marijuana card holding patients or anything else in violation of this, the only punishment is loss of a medical marijuana card. In addition, since law enforcement must jump through extra hoops to even determine if a grower is a designated medical marijuana caregiver authorized grower due to the agency's privacy rules, it was nearly impossible to document any legitimate enforcement infractions. In addition, there is another bill in the House right now, HB 380, which hopes to eliminate the felony for medical marijuana users who sell their product to others. I believe that one came out of committee as an ITL, but I don't think that's been voted on the House quite yet. Also, there's also HB 53 is another bill. This bill actually, let me just stop. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be distracted here. This bill also, when you combine it, one of the things that it does with this bill is it allows ATCs to start a new line of business as seedling distributors. to supply the new homegrown businesses, and it allows for quite an expansion. They can maybe they can offer horticulture classes and they can offer plants, but it also, I believe, if I read that correctly, there's no limitation on the amount of seedlings that the ATCs can then possess. And it's noteworthy that in 2013, former Democrat Governor Maggie Hassan actually required that home grow be stripped out of HB 573 at the time, because she even understood that cracking the door open to home grow could be quite an expansion of the program. Lastly, there is one more other bill in the House that seeks to increase the amount of marijuana that therapeutic cardholders can possess by 100%. So what we're seeing is, while well-meaning of the grow potential for this bill, there are multiple efforts to just constantly expand the amount of marijuana that can be possessed by individuals who are in the medical marijuana program. And as the state's hopes for recreational legalization dim this year, the effort is just to expand the medical marijuana program as much as possible. I mean, right now, we last year or so, we included anxiety on the list of medical marijuana conditions. I mean, honestly, who doesn't qualify at that point? So, does anyone have any questions for me?
Seeing none at this time, thank you.
Thank you.
Pat Sullivan. Afternoon again, Pat.
Buchanan, members of the committee. Again, my name's Pat Sullivan, represent the New Hampshire Association of Chiefs of Police, and we oppose House Bill 53. I won't go over the concerns, but it allows up to 8 ounces of marijuana. Back in my undercover days, a 4-finger ounce, so you put 8 fingers together and you've got your half pound of marijuana. We're concerned with the lack of oversight and accountability of the caregivers in this law. We're concerned with the caregivers having 5 patients at a time, but only supplying one of them with grown marijuana. In addition to that, in almost the same paragraph, you can pay $500 to this caregiver to supply that marijuana, but that does not include labor. So if I bump up my labor to $2,000 an hour, I could make fairly good money on this, being a legal drug dealer. So who's going to check this oversight on these caregivers and the growers of the marijuana? That's a concern of ours. And finally, the leasees of a building. So if you're a leasee of an apartment and you have an apartment owner or a landlord that has made investments in this property, it is subject still under federal law to be seized. And I don't think that's fair to the people that own this property to put them in that predicament. And I have no further information on this.
Thank you, Pat. You have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Alicia Bennett.
Good afternoon again. My name is Alicia Bennett, and I am here to express my full support of HB 53. I work as the Education and Outreach Coordinator for Granite Leaf Cannabis, but I'm here today as a patient. I've been registered participant in the therapeutic cannabis program since 2018, using cannabis to manage my chronic pain, phantom limb sensation, insomnia, nausea, PTSD, anxiety, and depression. I was born and raised in New Boston, and my mother is a master gardener who taught me about the wonders of plants. My love for plants led me to get a Bachelor of Science in Horticulture from Texas A&M University, where I focused on medicinal plants and education. I strongly believe this bill would greatly benefit therapeutic cannabis patients across the state of New Hampshire. One of the most significant challenges for patients like me is the affordability of cannabis. Growing cannabis at a production facility is expensive. Although New Hampshire's dispensaries are currently not-for-profit organizations and strive to make cannabis products more affordable, the cost remains a barrier for many patients. Legalizing home cultivation would empower patients to grow their own medicine, offering a more affordable option for those who wish to produce their own therapeutic cannabis. Additionally, for many patients, transportation to dispensaries is a financial burden. Some people, particularly those without a vehicle or who live in rural areas far from a dispensary, face significant challenges in accessing their medicine. Home cultivation would provide these patients with the ability to grow their own cannabis, easing the burden of transportation and ensuring access to their medicine. And while dispensaries offer a wide selection of cannabis products, they cannot grow every possible cultivar. Much like how different apple varieties offer unique flavors and benefits, each cannabis cultivar has specific characteristics that may work better for different patients. For example, certain cultivars help manage my phantom limb pain, but unfortunately, they are not always available in New Hampshire dispensaries. If home cultivation were legalized, I would be able to grow the specific cultivars that provide me with the most therapeutic benefits. As a gardener, cannabis is one of my favorite plants, but I've been unable to grow it. I find it ironic that I can grow plants like monkshood, also known as wolfsbane, a highly toxic plant, but I cannot legally grow cannabis, a plant with proven medicinal benefits. If this bill passed and home cultivation of cannabis becomes legal, I will grow plants in compliance with the law. Home cultivation can be done safely, and I strongly believe that legalizing it would be a positive step for patients in New Hampshire. Thank you for considering this important bill. I urge you to support HB 53 and give patients like myself the opportunity to cultivate our own medicine. Thank you. Do you have any questions at this time?
I don't think we do. Do we? Nope. Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. Jerry Kinnerk.
Thank you, and once again, for the record, my name is Jerry Kinnerk, and I'm the chair of the Therapeutic Cannabis Medical Oversight Board. I won't give the rest of the introduction because I've done that before, but just to add that 72% of our patients are certified for the treatment of pain, and the majority of patients are in the age group about 50 to 60. And as was previously noted, many times people have difficult long drives to get to ATCs. TCMOB supports home cultivation and therefore supports HB 53, which is the same as 1231 from 2024 and 431 from 2023, that would allow home cultivation of cannabis by therapeutic cannabis patients and designated caregivers. The reason is to help them with affordability, accessibility, and the availability of specific strains. Currently, home cultivation is not allowed. So 3 years ago, TCMOB held a listening session for feedback from patients about the program. The most common concerns were affordability of the products, because they're expensive, the accessibility of ATCs, because many times they have to drive a long way, and the availability of a specific strain, which may not be available at their nearest ATC. The point is that different people respond differently to different strains, or different conditions respond to different strains. Strains means, the kind of a plant. Like, for example, you may have a tomato, and you may have a cherry tomato, you may have a beefsteak tomato. Those are both tomatoes, but they're different strains. Different strains of cannabis have different cannabinoid profiles and terpene profiles. The terpenes are the things that give the smell to a plant. And those will have different effects upon different disorders and sometimes uniquely to that patient. So several patients in that listening session felt that home cultivation would at least partially address these concerns. So back in 2023, we reviewed the bill at that time. We voted unanimously. We agreed with the concept of home cultivation by therapeutic cannabis patients and caregivers. Notice I didn't say that we didn't go over every single word in it. We agreed with the concept. And then we renewed our support in October 2024. And then when this bill came forward, we renewed our support again. Now, TCMOB also noted that there were some concerns voiced in the past that home cultivation would diminish the knowledge of the cannabinoid content of home cultivated cannabis compared with products at ATCs. Because remember, all ATC products are tested for purity and cannabinoid content. And we agree that this is likely to some degree, but the bill does allow a home cultivator to be able to submit their cannabis to a lab for testing. That way they can know the cannabinoid profile and be sure about contaminants. The bill also allows the ATCs to provide seedlings with known relative cannabinoid content to patients to assist them in growing the specific strain that they need for their condition. Also, seeds with known targeted cannabinoid content are available and federally legal. I should also note, by the way, there was an amendment on this bill from what it was introduced, but that was just to update a date from the previous bill that had been missed when it was rewritten. And I do want to address some specific points at this time. Some of them are in response to some of the questions that were previously raised. Understand that at this point I'm speaking for myself because TCMOB is not processed what just went on in the last 10 minutes. Now, the bill does have robust protections with respect to limitations in the number of plants, registration of sites, and again, they must be enclosed and locked. And again, that is enclosed and locked exists on page 2. Page 18 through 20, where it says locked and enclosed and also shall not be subject to public view. So you can't, have it in your front yard and happen to have a fence around it with a lock. That's not going to work. Generally, it's going to either be a greenhouse or inside or in a rather hidden away area, but it still has to be something which is secure and locked and enclosed. It's also in the first page, page 1, in lines 3 through 7, also talks about the definition of cultivation location, which would be applying both to ATCs or to anybody else growing, that again, locked and secure. So that's already covered. Now, the other thing is that, so again, these are rather robust. It makes cultivation safe, secure, and controlled. Now, I wanted to address that question about the, I've got my own self lost here. Here we are. The sale of cannabis. It's true. There is nothing in this bill that addresses the sale of cannabis because that already exists in statute. It doesn't need to be here. In RSA 126X3:6, it says any qualifying patient or designated caregiver who sells cannabis to another person who is not a qualifying patient or designated caregiver under this chapter shall be subject to the penalties of RSA 318 and so on and so forth. So that's already in statute. We don't need to have it in this bill because it's there. Second, that issue about compensation. First, it's important to understand that the language on page 2, lines 26 to 30, other than the bold, already exists in statute. And what that has to do with is that it prohibits the designated caregivers from charging for taking care of somebody for whom they are a caregiver. So they can, because remember, most of the job of a designated caregiver for someone who, let's say, doesn't drive or is elderly and infirm is to drive to an ATC and pick it up. They can get compensated for the cost of the gasoline to drive there, but not their labor. It's a labor of love. They're compensated, just like when I was in the house, I got compensated for mileage. Well, I got $100 a year too, but I mean, nevertheless, it was, it's not something where you're doing this to make money. You're doing it to be compensated. The only addition, and because this will apply to growing as well, the addition is putting a cap not to exceed 500 per calendar year. So what it says is, if you're growing for somebody and you're growing it inside, you have to buy the seedlings. That's a cost. You may have to buy fertilizer. That's a cost. Growing medium, electricity for lights, all those are costs. You can ask for compensation from the person for whom you're caregiving up to $500, not more than that, but not including labor. It doesn't mean you can tack on $2,000 an hour for labor on top of that. That is not what this says. Because if you take out the new addition, it says a designated caregiver may receive compensation for costs, not including labor. So it excludes labor. It doesn't mean that that's tagged on. The $500 just gives a cap for what the costs can be. So you can't, jack up your costs really high because it shouldn't cost more than $500 to grow for one person, likely. So I think that issue about the compensation is not an issue. It is safe and secure. So anyway, the bottom line is, now I'll go back to what we state as far as TCMOB. We urge you to pass it to allow home cultivation by patients and designated caregivers because we feel it will help with affordability, accessibility, and the availability of specific strains. And I'd be glad to take any questions, and I hope I clarified those previous concerns that have been brought up.
Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. I see that the limit, if you are a qualified patient and you're complying with this, if this became law, says 8 ounces. Is that just for flour, or what happens if it was made into edibles?
Actually, I'm sorry, can you guide me as to where, oh, here we are.
Page 2, line 2.
Yeah, yeah.
8 ounces. I assume that means flour, but what would happen if the person was home growing and made edible products or out of what they grew? Is there any limitation on the possession of, say, edible products?
Okay, I think that means, I think in this setting, because we're not talking about, let's say you make a pan of brownies and they happen to weigh 12 ounces, because that's not all usable cannabis. That's brownies that happen to have cannabis in it. So I think they're speaking of the cannabis flower. I'd have to go back to the definition, but I think that is, perhaps somebody who's still coming up might be able to clarify that. Again, I'd have to go dig into the RSA to be sure about that. But it does, I'm quite sure this does not mean something, like, again, a pan of brownies. 'Cause that may weigh a pound.
Because in the fall, my 8 ounces of flour and 8 ounces of brownies is, I think it's totally different, but it doesn't seem to distinguish between the two. So if there were a limitation on the amount of, say, edible products you could make out of what you home grew, what would be a ballpark for that to be?
I think the reason is because that definition exists in, Mike, where does that exist? I think it's in statute already in 126. Yeah, but can you tell me where?
Dispensary, they kind of explain that to go across, and it's based on THC content.
Yeah.
In the product. So the stronger it is, the
Oh,
less
wait.
you get.
I just found it. I'm sorry. Because cannabis in 126X1, sorry, it took me a moment to find it. 126X1, Roman 3. Cannabis means all parts of any plant, whether growing or not, the seeds, the resin, on and on and on. So it actually would be the whole plant.
Thank you. And while you're got the laws up, if you do home grow and you're a qualified patient, and if you were to, can you share that with another qualified patient? Right? Would they not be allowed to?
I think you are allowed, because it says you cannot sell it to a non-patient. I think you're allowed to share with the patient. But I would defer perhaps. I'm prepared to speak to certain things, other ones I'd have to look up. Perhaps Mr. Holt, who lives this for the last 10 years, could answer that more quickly than I. If you want to ask him for, I think he's not testifying, but he's here to be an expert.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Bisson? EISS, oh, I'm sorry.
Sitting down a long time makes it hard to get up and then walk. Excuse me. My name is Michael Bisson. I come from Franklin. I have been here since the program started. I began by going to the HHS hearings that were over at Fruit Street, talking about when the regulations went in place. So I have seen the evolution from the beginning. I spent a decade in California, and then I moved to Michigan after they legalized and went through the medical program in all those states and saw how everybody deals with the exact same problems we're dealing with here. And that is, we all have to live together side by side, and yet we all want to survive somehow. And so I've heard a lot about the grow situation. That's what I'm here to talk about today. It's important to understand that I have several relatives that live in triplex in Manchester, Nashua, and other places that are high impact in the population. And if you think that you're going to come in there and you're going to start growing plants that stink like a skunk walk through your house and everything's going to be fine, no, it's not going to happen. And your neighbors aren't going to like it because they got kids. Your landlord's not going to like it because your neighbors don't like it. There's already a lot of problems that I'm sure people have about just general consumption in general. I mean,
Nashua's a hop, skip, and a jump right over the border where recreational marijuana is smoked right on the corners. So people along the border specifically, if I may use the word they deal with it a lot more than maybe the more rural areas may. I was talking to Mr. Gannon earlier, and it really comes down to demographics when I look at the grow situation, because if you look at your own statistical analysis, you'll see that the majority of people are well above 45. That means they are career people. They're older, obviously. They own a home, like myself. I own a home. It took a long time to own a home. And so you're looking at people that have seriousness in their life. They had a career, they went to school, they own a home, they pay taxes, they drive cars. I'm not talking about an 18-year-old surfer with a bum knee. All right, and that's a lot of concern about, oh, it's going to be diverted, it's going to be diverted. I don't know of too many people that are just going to start handing out their oxys and morphine, to be honest with you, because if they're a chronic pain patient, they need that stuff. They don't just give it away. They clamp right on it. They count pills. Did I take it today? I'm really hurting today. Did I take enough? Did I know what to take? So having a therapeutic is the key term here. When I go into a dispensary and I look at the price on the wall, as somebody who lives on a disability check, owns a home, and still has to find a way to work a little bit to survive, I stopped walking in the store. It's just not possible. If I spent $220 or $300 a month on 1 ounce, then that's 28 grams. There's 30 days in a month. You have now allowed me a small gram a day. That's it. That's all you gave me, 1. That's enough for a single marijuana cigarette if you want to smoke. I don't smoke. The new investigative drug program was closed by Bush 41 when over 5,000 applications for the program were submitted because people wanted cannabis because they had cancer, and it was this major program that happened from California. There are still people on the federal program that receive 300 joints a month. Now, if you figure that out, they smoke for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There's 3. They have after dinner, after lunch, after breakfast. There's 3 more. And they still got to wake up in the middle of the night and deal with their systems. And then they have a loose one laying around for if they have a peak moment. And these people, they have driver's licenses, firearms licenses. They are commodities traders. And you know what? They do that because they have a federal designation of, it's cool, man. So they're the lucky ones. They got into a program that got shut down that was effective. Here we have a chance to help the people at home that can help themselves a little bit. Now, what I'm looking at is, in the outside grow scenario, we went through it in California, Michigan. The greenhouse is the only way to go. You can have a chain link fence open roof, but it has to be chain link. The walls cannot be slatted that somebody could walk up to and peek through. It would have to be a continuous wall that nobody could see through a slat. So that outlawed chain link fence with the little things threaded through them. So there's a lot of things that other states have already went through as they created regulations and processes. You know, I'm looking at, since time period when I got into this business, we now have engineered seeds. I'm going to buy a product that's been cross-strained with many other cannabis-related products. People talk about hemp, they talk about cannabis, they talk about marijuana. They are all cannabis plants. They can become semantic all they want. As much as I appreciate Sam, I consider them the 10th man. Much like the chiefs of police, they're going to come in here and they're going to tell you every possible thing that could go wrong that they have researched, and they're going to make you believe that everything that they see is criminality. Oh, that's a possible criminal thing. Oh, that's a possible criminal thing. Well, that's a policeman. He's a hammer. He's going to tell you that. I am looking at buying seeds that autoflower. And for many people, that's going to take away all this problem that we've been having over the years, because I don't need to have incredible lighting anymore, because my plant's going to grow, it's going to flower, it's going to be done, it's going to die. I don't have to worry about vegetating this seedling with all kinds of lighting in a locked space. You're talking about investment of materials. You're talking about extending my utility payments into a larger envelope. I mean, I can't really afford to do that and go crazy here. So even if we're going to grow, well, how much are we actually really going to grow? Because as a homeowner on a fixed income, where's that extra hundreds and hundreds of dollars coming from? So I'm looking to make it as simple as possible. With these autoflower seeds, I can gauge that every so many days I plant another seed so that when they mature in 90 days, there's medicine. Right now, There are possibilities that I could travel out of state and go to alternative treatment centers that exist in Maine, where I could significantly cut my cost. But now there are other people in this room that would tell me I'm crossing state lines and doing all kinds of stuff that's probably not healthy. So I am looking at trying to find a way to get me to where I need to be. You know, I have chronic pain from when I was 20 years old. I was gored through the groin by the handlebar of a motorcycle right here in Concord. My leg was nearly torn off and I bled out on the road and died and was brought back to life at the hospital. And so it's easier for me to look from where I've been dead as an overview on everything around me and just get very frustrated how simple some of these things can seem. I would hope that you would consider that this is an ought to pass. And over the next few weeks, I've been collecting cards for every single senator. I'm hoping to sit down and spend some time with each and every one, at least for a few minutes. If I cannot assuage your fears, I can at least begin to understand what it is we can do to get to a point where you could be comfortable with this. Because that is the end goal. Ultimately, every senator has at least 8 House members underneath them that has a direct pulse of what the people are doing underneath them. You're busy doing some pretty big things up here, but there's plenty of House members who have a much smaller group of people that they can talk to and get you a better feel of what your individual local little tiny communities are doing underneath your umbrella. And I suggest you please do that, because we've already seen what the vote looks like. You may have some people in your area that voted no on it, and I get it. It's a tough call to make. We're looking at potentially expanding the program again for many people. And what I've heard over and over is, do we have to keep going back and revisiting this? I will say one last thing about the CBD hemp derivative thing that I think is important. There was a question about the synthetic cannabinoids. It's important to understand that for now, I don't think synthetic cannabinoids are really there yet. I think because we're not understanding everything and testing everything, and there's no real market, and they're kind of illegal, and it's just in a gray area right now. But what the dispensaries are talking about that's important here is they're bringing in materials that will be independently tested before they are put into bulk use for building a product. So they'll be batch testing quantifiable materials. If it's not passing their specs, they're not buying it. Thank you so much.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Matt Simon, come on down again. Sure, if you keep it really short.
Yeah, it's under the definition of cannabis, I said it was the whole plant. That's incorrect, because as I read the next sentence, it shall not include the mature stalks of such plants. So, because the stalk is what's big and heavy. So it's not the stalk.
Very good, thank you.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chairman and Senators. Again, for the record, Matt Simon, representing Granite Leaf Cannabis. I've got 2 handouts coming around. I've been advocating for allowing cannabis patients to grow their own plants for more than 15 years. I created these handouts probably about a decade ago when I was a staffer at the Marijuana Policy Project. I've updated them every year as more states have come online and as more bills have passed one or the other chamber and not quite become law. So as you can see from the handout that says home cultivation laws in New England, it is now legal for patients and adults 21 and older to cultivate limited amounts of cannabis in every New England state except New Hampshire. I would say, based on my experiences lobbying in all of these states, this is the least controversial aspect of cannabis legalization or medical cannabis policy. In states that have limited the plant counts to a reasonable amount, which is every New England state, there have not been significant problems reported. We have not heard them reported in hearings on these previous bills. We've heard a lot of concerns expressed about what might happen. And I do think it's important to note that the concerns that have been expressed and the opposition that's been expressed today has come from organizations rather, who have opposed therapeutic cannabis policy in New Hampshire throughout the time we've been debating it. The Chiefs of Police Association and Project SAM were both vigorously opposed to the therapeutic cannabis bill when it first passed in 2013. They've been opposing home grow bills ever since and lots of other bills. So we seem to be at an impasse, and the House overwhelmingly has supported this many times. The Senate's passed it a few times. When I talk to people outside this building, they ask, what in the world is the big deal in the live free or die state? And when I talk to people inside this building, I often get somewhat different reactions. So if I have to come back for another 15 years, I'll probably do it. I hope that won't be required. I hope we can find a way to move forward on this. Several different sponsors have taken the lead on this bill. They've all been willing to compromise. It seems like every time we change something to alleviate somebody's concern, for example, the $500, that's something that's in there because in a few other states, caregivers have viewed this as a business opportunity and have probably exploited some patients. We did not want that to happen in New Hampshire, so we said $500 is the absolute max that you can get in a calendar year if you're growing for a patient. So I want to be very clear about one thing. Home cultivation of cannabis is a felony in New Hampshire right now today. It's in RSA 318B26. That's the Controlled Drug Act penalties. You won't see the word home grow or the word cultivation because they use the terms manufacture of a controlled drug, marijuana. So manufacture of 1 ounce or more of marijuana is a felony for which you can be arrested and you can do serious time. And that is the case. The 8 ounces, that's something that has changed a few times over the years. The idea is that if a patient grows 3 plants, harvests at the same time, does a good job cultivating, that they would be in excess of the 2 ounce possession limit. So some states allow unlimited possession if it's at the cultivation location. In previous trips through the legislature for this bill, it became clear that a limit that was specific to the cultivation location would make sense. So if your cannabis is at the place where the plants are, you can have up to 8 ounces. If you're anywhere else in the state of New Hampshire, the possession limit is 2 ounces. Chief Sullivan mentioned something, I'm not sure I caught it, but I believe he was talking about property owners, and it's not fair to them to require them to allow cannabis cultivation. I just want to be very clear that is absolutely in the bill, that you cannot cultivate cannabis without written permission from the property owner, and that property owners absolutely have the ability to prohibit cultivation. Finally, the ATCs, granted leave, I'll only speak for us. We strongly support this. We do not view it as a bottom line issue. We might be able to make a few dollars selling seedlings. We'll probably lose money overall because patients, if they're successful growing their own, will buy less from us. But we're not viewing it through that lens. Our patients feel strongly that they should be free to cultivate as their counterparts in every other New England state are able. They're mad that they can't do it here. Sometimes they yell at us, and we're here to stand up for their rights here in the Live Free or Die state. So hope this bill passes. I don't understand how patients are well served by the threat of felony prosecution for cultivation. So we're here to support our patients. We ask you to support the bill. Happy to answer any questions.
Just sort of mix the next 3 bills, just because you're talking about the lack of harm from marijuana. And it's sort of I should have stopped you at the time and caught you on the moment. But the next 2 bills and this bill, you were talking about that it wouldn't be harmful. We have, I'm thinking there are harms out there. Poly use would be one big thing. I think the police would say that marijuana is now being mixed and causing increased accidents and deaths. So you sort of used a general thing, which will carry over into the next 2 bills. You were alluding to that it wasn't harmful, and I was, okay.
May I, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I did not say that marijuana isn't harmful. And in fact, I have never said that in my entire career. I said that home cultivation policies that have been limited in the plant number have not resulted in documented policy outcomes that have been negative, at least not that have been expressed in any of the public hearings on any of these bills for the last 15 years. There are harms associated with cannabis, and the goal of public policy, in my opinion, should be to create policies that balance personal freedom with effective regulation. And I hope that's what we're here to do.
Thank you. Go ahead, Sam. I'm going to give you the first chance.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. How many valid registry identification cards have been issued in the state of New Hampshire? Do you have any idea?
My understanding is the current count for registered patients is right at about 16,000. It was 15,000 last year, and since the bills passed in October that expanded qualifying conditions, there's been a slight uptick in the rate of registration. So I think we're at about 16,000, and I'm not sure how many caregivers.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Thank you. And there are only 7 dispensaries in the state of New Hampshire. And in fact, if you're seeking marijuana for therapeutic use in the state right now, all 16,000 of these people need to go to one of those 7 locations.
I believe that's the idea. That's what I believe policymakers intended. I don't think it's the reality. I think the reality is that patients know they can go to neighboring states or they can buy from the illicit market. The RSA 126X offers legal protections to patients regardless of where they obtain the cannabis. So we're trying to bring prices down. We're trying to pass some incremental improvements that would, on the policy level, make it easier to do that so we can keep patients in the state, keep them from feeling they need to go to unregulated markets, particularly to our east. There is an unregulated market for medical cannabis.
Thank you.
Remind me, if you will, how much marijuana, like how many ounces per plant, a fully developed, healthy plant? Ballpark?
It's an unanswerable question. Okay. Most rookies are lucky to get an ounce out of a plant. A professional cultivator can do much better. A lot has to do with the lights and the equipment.
Thank you.
It's just like tomatoes.
And I know you grow a lot of tomatoes. I get one.
Thank you,
Travis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. So one concern I had, and I've had this about this home grow in general, it says this would allow for 8 ounce limit at the cultivation location, okay? But how would a law enforcement official or someone from DHHS know that that 8 ounces was from what they grew at their house versus something they bought on the black market or something they bought out of state? I mean, I understand if you bring it in, test it, you can maybe line up the strain to what an ATC sells, but for a police officer to establish probable cause in any meaningful way that that's the actual case, how would that actually happen in real life, in the real world?
Well, Senator, I think if a law enforcement officer, if a prosecutor wanted to charge a patient for a violation of this statute, the burden of proof would be on them to argue in court that the patient was in excess of the cultivation limit. So if, in theory, I don't think any patient would do this, but if I imported 5 pounds of cannabis from Maine, it's there. I could go get it and bring it back. I could keep it with my plants. It would be very hard for me to argue that 5 pounds of cannabis came off of my 3 mature plants. And it would be probably pretty easy to prove in court that it didn't. So I would, in the unlikely event that a patient egregiously violated this law in a way that actually undermined public safety in such a way that a felony charge was warranted, it would be possible to convict that person because there would be evidence.
Mm-hmm. I understand 5 pounds, but that's because that's over the 8 ounce limit. What I'm asking for, let's say a patient has 7 ounces, and how would any law enforcement official know that that 7 ounces was grown by the patient or the qualified caregiver versus purchased in the black market?
I believe they wouldn't be able to know. Again, the law protects patients possessing up to 2 ounces regardless of the source, and that would technically be the case at the cultivation location, but...
If I can ask a follow-up, and if, let's just say you had 2 qualified patients living in the same house or same residence, and I guess my concern is if one person is allowed to grow it and they share it with the, it could be their spouse or whatever, is that something that's permitted under the existing law with therapeutic products?
Yes.
Would it also apply to any home grow products?
Registered patients are legally allowed to share cannabis with each other under the current provisions of RSA 126X.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
And if I may, just
Sure,
add
go
on to
ahead.
that, like I've spoken to support groups for MS, for example, and the patients there told me that we find specific strains are helpful, other strains aren't. Once we find one that works, we want to be able to grow that one and share it with other MS patients so they can try it and see if that works for them as well. That's been part of the statute all along.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simon.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to testify on HB 53 who I missed? Joe? Come back. Good to see you again, Dr. Hannon.
Nice to see you. I didn't have time for a disguise change, so.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to me today, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, again. As someone deeply engaged in the intersection of healthcare access and civil liberties, I believe HB 53 is not just a policy improvement, it's a moral imperative. Right now, New Hampshire stands alone in New England in denying medical cannabis patients the right to grow their own medicine. This not only burdens patients financially, forcing them to rely solely on dispensary prices, but it also limits access for those living far from the state's few dispensaries. Many of these patients suffer from chronic pain, cancer, PTSD, or other debilitating conditions. Why should they be forced to choose between paying their utility bills and accessing the medicine they need to function? HB 53 would allow their patients and their designated caregivers to grow a modest amount of cannabis, just 3 mature and 3 immature plants plus seedlings. This is not a loophole for diversion. It's a compassionate, controlled, and reasonable measure to improve access for patients. Other states have successfully implemented home cultivation without issues. Please note, New Hampshire allows more than a modest amount of home brewing of beer and wine with zero state oversight. With basic safety measures like secure growing environments, the risks are minuscule and the benefits to patients are significant. From a civil rights perspective, denying patients the ability to grow their own medicine perpetuates the unnecessary suffering and economic inequality. Imagine if diabetics were able to grow their own insulin cheaply and safely, and it were illegal to do so in New Hampshire. It's time for New Hampshire to treat its therapeutic cannabis patients with the dignity and the trust that they deserve. Please support HB 53. The time is long past due for this humanitarian measure to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hannon. Seeing no questions, have a good day. Does anyone else wish to testify on HB 53 that we missed? Seeing none, we'll adjourn the hearing. Down, Representative Wheeler. You're looking good today. Always looking sharp.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Actually, you sounded very sharp the other day too on the podium. But
Thank you.
whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Gannon and friends and colleagues on the House Judiciary Committee. We went a little bit over, and I have to go at 3. Apologies for that, so I will be brief. But I'm happy to take any questions that the committee may have. HB 196 is legislation which would amend the current annulment statute in the state of New Hampshire. Currently, people have to go and pay a $300 payment to get a request for their annulment. This legislation would amend the statute to allow people to simply request that they can get an annulment hearing without having to have the onerous $300 charge. This legislation is important because there are people throughout the state who are prevented from getting loans or jobs, federal corporate jobs. They're prevented from going to the military and doing other things, all because this is a federally illegal substance, and this is a substance which, if on your record, can result in you not getting those jobs. So for a mistake that you might have made in your teenage years, you are prevented from moving forward in life and rehabilitating yourself. So this legislation would try to open up the door to allow people to rehabilitate themselves. There was an amendment to the legislation. Originally, the bill was such that the annulment would be automatic, that the Department of Justice would go through and annul the crime automatically of whomever they could find in their records to who would have a violation or a misdemeanor level charge offense for possession of cannabis prior to January 1, 25. The new amended version of the legislation was worked on with Attorney Aaron Cregan of the Judicial Council, trying to come up with a way to pass this legislation that wouldn't be onerous for the Department of Justice and their staff, which the original bill was. This legislation would simply allow people to request for their annulment, and the court, if determined that they were eligible for one, and would be able to give them that. So with that, Mr. Chairman, the legislation last biennium passed the House Criminal Justice Committee 14-6. I was really proud of that. And this biennium, I'm prouder to say that it passed unanimously because of the amendments and work that we were able to get done on the House. So I'm happy to work with you in any way to get this over the line to amend the annulment statute so we're able to get this done. Not everyone who supported this supported legalization because they recognize that this is about the people who are trying to move forward to rehabilitate, move forward in life to show that they've moved on from their teenage or younger years. With that, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for hearing
I'm
my
glad your
testimony.
power of persuasion keeps getting better and better every year.
Thank you very much,
I still
Mr. Chair.
recommend law school for you somewhere down the line. Senators, do we have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Have a good day.
Bill Bright, New Hampshire State Police. Officer Bright, how you doing?
Good afternoon. I'm doing well. Thank you, sir.
Good.
Thank you for hearing my testimony. My name is Bill Bright. I'm a major with the New Hampshire State Police. We are opposed to this bill on some technical levels. So it's a very vague as far as the language in what the requirements would be for the Department of Safety. It requires the Department of Safety to examine an arrest or conviction to determine whether it should be annulled, and we don't know on what basis that ask is. It could be, if cases are mixed with other substances, but were pled down to misdemeanor or violation offenses on marijuana charges, would that apply? It could mean, all sorts of different things. And in some of that research would take more than what the Department of Safety has in their own records. It would require reaching out to other police departments to research those cases potentially. In addition, we would anticipate that the level of requests that would come in this case could be thousands and thousands of cases. If you just think of all of the marijuana arrests that have taken place prior to January 1st of 2025, which is what this bill says, I mean, this could be thousands and thousands of cases. And our criminal records division is only so big, and we have only so many people that are not capable at this moment to handle the scope of the requests that may come in as a result of this bill being passed. In addition to that, there would be some expenses for the requirement in paragraph 4 for publishing a report on the website on the number of qualified records removed from its records pursuant to this section. There would be some IT considerations, programming, So we would anticipate overall needing to add additional staff in order to handle the volume of cases that may come in from this, in addition to some additional costs for programming and whatever else may come in on the back end.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. I assume there's a process in state statute or court rules or anything for any kind of conviction. Is that true?
I believe so.
For other convictions?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see any reason why the existing process or procedure couldn't be used for marijuana?
Yeah, I believe that it's already established. I believe there's already a law or a statute in place for, I think it's prior to 2017 or something. I just looked at it briefly. Up to 3/4 of an ounce. I think that already exists. So there are some, some basis for annulment requests at the moment, and our criminal records division and the courts handle those as they come in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're all set. Derek Cataldo. Good afternoon, officer. How you doing?
Afternoon, Chairman. Chairman Gannon, members of the committee, my name is Lieutenant Derek Cataldo. I'm with the Manchester Police Department, and I am testifying today on behalf of the New Hampshire Association of Chiefs of Police. The association is opposed to HB 196 under two main points. The first is the bill somewhat undermines current law in that it removes the consequences for our current law without any substantial change to the law itself. And the concern is this will come up every couple of years or every year or so, just continually wiping away any consequences for people who are habitually violating the law. And the second point is this greatly expands the current annulment statute, which I think the senator was just asking about, which is 651(5)(b). And like the major was saying, the current annulment statute requires the petitioner to prove that the conviction was for actually 3/4 amount or less. This bill just says any misdemeanor violation. And a large issue in the association's view is many convictions are plea bargain down from felonies, larger amounts, distribution, and sometimes those pleas encompass other crimes, resisting arrest, assaults, and this takes no mitigation process or no individual review for any of those. So we could have somebody whose case was involving a large amount and it was pled down, and under this, it would be basically automatically annulled as long as they filed a petition. Whereas the current annulment statute requires them to prove it was actually that 3/4 of an ounce that was decriminalized in 2017. And based on those 2 points, the association is opposed to this bill. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Senator Epps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. If I suppose this would apply to any conviction. If I got an annulment, and let's say you ran my license or my background to see if I had a prior history, would you be able to see that when you do that search? Or is it completely wiped out?
Now, from my understanding, it is removed. It wouldn't be visible.
Thank you.
We're all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Hannon, come back one more time, maybe two.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee again. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of HB 196. This bill is about fairness, it's about healing, and it's about aligning our justice system with our values. HB 196 allows individuals convicted of low-level cannabis possession up to 2 ounces of marijuana or 5 grams of hash to petition the court for annulment. These are offenses that in many states are no longer even illegal. And in New Hampshire, the public conversation has clearly shifted towards legalization. So why should people continue to carry the burden of past convictions for conduct that is no longer considered criminal by modern standards? These records follow people for life. They affect employment, housing, education, and child custody. And the reality is that these laws have historically been enforced in a racially disproportionate manner. Expungement is a necessary step towards justice and reconciliation. This bill doesn't grant automatic expungement. It allows a petition process with court discretion, and that's a reasonable balance between fairness and accountability. Ultimately, HB 196 is about giving people a second chance. If we're serious about reforming our cannabis laws, we must be equally serious about addressing the damage done under the old ones. Please vote ought to pass on HB 196. Thank you.
Dr. Hannan, any questions? Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Honorable Dr. Hannan, for taking my question. In line 9, it says, should the Department
I'm sorry, where?
In line 9.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Should the Department of Safety fail to annul a qualified record? So I think I'm a little concerned with the phrasing there because it sets up the petition as something that it should be viewed as valid without having been reviewed. So
I'm sorry, what page? Again, you said line 9.
So in the bill, line 9,
Page. There's lines on different pages.
there's only one page.
I'm sorry. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
go on.
So any person who believes he or she is eligible for annulment pursuant to this section may request that the Department of Safety examine his or her arrest or conviction to determine whether it should be annulled. So they're petitioning the Department of Safety to evaluate, am I eligible for annulment? But then the way this is phrased, should the Department of Safety fail to annul a qualified record? So if we are asking the Department of Safety to be the ones to determine if it is qualified, the next line brings up the idea that maybe somebody else should be viewing that too. Who's determining the qualification? If we're assuming that if they don't accept the petition, it's a failure on the Department of Safety.
I think it's a valid concern, Senator, especially considering that since a lot of the members of the Department of Safety have been here speaking against this bill today. So I think it's a real concern.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Senator.
And I'm not trying to paraphrase your question, but if I understand what you may have been inquiring about is generally the court, it grants an annulment, not the Department of Safety.
Right.
So I think for here, if it's annulled, normally the court would tell the Department of Safety, this has been annulled, and then they take action. But this is, I think, the opposite where it suggests that you would submit that petition to the Department of Safety, but they're not the court to grant the annulment. I guess the court would have to grant it. Then it would be perhaps provided to the Department of Safety. I'm just saying, for it to operate in reality, I don't think the Department of Safety on its own can annul a conviction. I think that's the question that she was.
I don't disagree, and I'm not a lawyer per se, or at all. So
Very good.
Okay.
We understand the problem. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Dr. Hannan.
thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak who I didn't give a chance to? Bill, how could I miss you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think my name was on the list. I was going to come up with the major and got called away for another quick meeting. So
okay.
Thank you, members of the committee and the chairman. My name is Victor Muzzy. I'm the captain in the state police in charge of the Justice Information Bureau, which through my prior testimony you all recognize encompasses the criminal records unit. So I'm here, I guess, to answer any questions that you may have relative to that. In addition, I guess what I would say is, Senator, to your point, the way the bill is written, it is kind of confusing. And normally a petition would go to the court. This makes it a little unclear as to whether we're supposed to receive that petition and do something with that or whether we're waiting for the court to tell us. That's the normal process, as I'm sure you're well aware. Additionally to that, a question that came up about whether or not the record can be seen. The criminal records unit can see all the annulments, right? So we can see that in the background, I'll say, or attached to a person's record, but that is not something that would get released. Law enforcement, in normal practice, is entitled to the full confidential record, we say, but if it's been annulled, that would not be visible, I don't believe, to law enforcement. So it's really only our clerks in the office and myself and things that would be able to see records that had been annulled. And I think the other part to that, as you folks are all well aware, I'm sure, is a cycle of a crime consists of an arrest, a complaint that's filed, and then a conviction. And two, I think it was the Manchester lieutenant that testified from my perspective as the keeper of those records. What is it that I'm supposed to annul? Is it the conviction? Is it the arrest? Is it both? I think this does not clarify that or lend clarity to that necessarily. And I understand this is a quite different version from the original version of the bill, which I think there's some extraneous language that still exists that probably applies to the older version of this, the much longer version. So I think a few questions relative to that as I read it relative to how those records should be treated, or how that process should be treated really from the criminal record standpoint. So I'm happy to take any questions you may have additional.
No. Okay, you're all set.
Thank you, sir.
Very much. Anyone else wish to testify in this bill? Seeing none. Good afternoon, Representative. How you doing today? We talking Bitcoins today, or what are we talking? No, okay. Different day.
Your own financial advisor.
That's right. That's blockchain, your blockchain.
I think he just wants some free financial advice.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm here for House Bill 75. I'm pinch hitting for the sponsor, Representative Verville from Deerfield. He couldn't make it today,
Very good.
so I'm doing him a favor so that I can call in this favor at a
Yeah,
future
I hope
point.
you do.
There you go. So for the record, my name is Keith M. and I represent Hillsborough 42. It serves the communities of Lineborough, Mount Vernon, and New Boston. But I'm here today to introduce House Bill 75, legalizing cannabis for persons 21 years of age or older on behalf of the prime sponsor, Representative Verville Deerfield. He couldn't be here today, so he provided me with the following remarks. This bill is the simplest solution to achieve the desires of the vast majority of our constituents concerning the legal status of cannabis. This bill removes all references to cannabis in New Hampshire RSA, except the prohibition for minors and our medical cannabis statutes. This bill keeps the state of New Hampshire out of the cannabis business while ending the demonstrably failed prohibition of cannabis in New Hampshire. Over the past half a century, we have seen the availability, potency, and quality of cannabis increase despite its legal status. We have achieved only two things under state-level prohibition. We have forced cannabis users to go back to the black market, where they're exposed and enticed to try other more addictive, dangerous, and potentially lethal substances such as amphetamines, barbiturates, narcotics, and opioids. This is the primary source of addicts in New Hampshire. Let us break this cycle. We have also created a vast number of criminals out of otherwise productive members of society for choosing to use a substance that grows naturally in New Hampshire and across the globe and is far less addictive or dangerous than ethanol or nicotine. This bill does not end prohibition on cannabis. It merely shifts the burden and responsibility of cannabis prohibition enforcement onto the federal government. This is the safety mechanism in the bill to ensure that mass production and distribution of cannabis does not occur in New Hampshire, as the federal prohibition is still in full force. Let us use valuable but limited New Hampshire resources better than wasting them on a demonstrably failed prohibition model. Let us redirect the money that we waste enforcing cannabis prohibition to more pressing needs like narcotics and opioid enforcement and treatment. I hope we can all agree that money would be better spent. This bill does not have the carrot of generating state revenues, but it keeps the state out of the pot business. It does not grow the size of government and will either save the state money or allow those monies to be redirected to better use. Please support this bill as written so that New Hampshire can finally end the state level war on cannabis, deliver the wants of our constituents, and finally put an end to the circular conversations relative to cannabis law reform. Thank you for your time and consideration concerning this matter. And that concludes Representative Verville's remarks. So I'm not an expert on this statute. To me, it looks like, or this legislation, to me, it looks like it's going to overturn the entire apple cart. So it pretty much is a full repeal except for minors and medical marijuana. It passed the House on a voice vote. The prior vote to that was an ITL, and I think it passed, or the ITL failed 167 to 190, so it was a little more than 50-some%. Decided not to kill this bill in the House, but to pass it to you in the Senate. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions, but I have.
Sure, I'll give you a general question.
Yeah.
So in my communities, Fremont, Danville, Seabrook, just to name three, I've had people come to me in the past few years, their child has been killed. Usually they thought they were smoking marijuana, they were laced with fentanyl. You're going to be concerned with the product on the street being tainted, without state control. We don't know what's out there.
I mean, that's
Wild West.
That's what happens in the black market, right? We're not worried that Budweiser is going to poison us with fentanyl because that's, they have a business model that they want their customers to survive and buy more beer, right? So I think the similar thing would happen if the black market was undermined by, the white market.
But this is legalizing anybody. You're not like putting it, I didn't like it before when it was going to be state controlled, but at least I knew there's a quality product out in the street. I'm afraid people, users, kids are going to get.
This isn't my bill. I'm not a sponsor.
I'm good.
But I'm just understanding after looking at it, it's a full repeal except for.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Any other
much.
questions? Seeing none,
All right,
thank you very much. Sue Hamola. The last shall be first, and those I forgot shall be second.
Hi, Sue Hamola, representing Sam, New Hampshire. Just want to speak really briefly on this. I have testified and provided countless amounts of information, so I won't rehash any of that. I'll just reiterate the fact that there's negative public health outcomes with regard to legalization, recreational legalization, and for every scant dollar that a state may take in a revenue type of scenario, it actually costs 4x to mitigate the public health harms, and those are borne by communities and law enforcement and hospitals. The one thing I will want to say is that it was made mention that legalization, that the public support for legalization is strong. Well, no, it's actually not. I mean, I would remind everyone that Governor Ayotte had clearly communicated her decision not to support legalization while she was in the campaign phase, and she won fairly decisively. In addition, just across the states, there were 3 states actually, Florida, North Dakota, and South Dakota, that actually their voters said no to legalization. So it's actually starting to wane. The public support for legalization is starting to wane because the headlines are getting so bad. So all the data that I've given to you before has gotten only so much worse. So we don't support this measure. The only thing I just want to, in closing, I just want to follow back up with a medical marijuana program note. A lot of the bills that we're seeing for the expansion are to do 2 things. It's to allow people to, reduce, maybe people have difficulty getting to ATCs, reduce number of trips, and to the affordability issue. Well, with regard to reducing the number of trips, the last time I checked, if I understand this correctly, that is what the designated caregiver program is for. That's why we have the designated caregiver program, is to help people who might not have the ability to go to the ATCs regular or not drive. With regard to the cost of product, understand that the cost of product is very high, and that's, that can be a concern. But I want to remind people that, and this is public knowledge, I got this data from the 2022 Therapeutic Cannabis Program report, but the ATCs, each of the ATCs, state-sanctioned ATCs, authorized approximately, they gave away about $500,000 in discounts, each one of them. So, $1.5 million in discounts to compassionate care cardholders and veterans. So a compassionate care person is somebody who might be on a fixed income, low income, things like that. I think that the program as we have it already addresses people that may have to pick between a utility bill and their cannabis product. to some extent. That's all. Any questions?
Thank you very much. I don't think so. Have a great day. Pat Sullivan, you're up last time for today. Sort of like it's the ninth inning, you're about second to last batter.
Matt Simons isn't even here for me. So, good afternoon, Senator Gannon, members of the committee. I'm Pat Sullivan with the New Hampshire Chiefs Association, and again, we oppose this legalization effort. Several key points. It keeps the black market in place. People are still going to go to their dealers to obtain their marijuana, which will contain no quality control or oversight of contaminants. There are no income coming into the state. The state's left holding the financial burden for treatment of patients that may be suffering as a result of excess use. There's no penalties for sales, and that's why we oppose it. Thank you.
I have an outside question for you.
Okay.
I'll decide. I'll say it's related. Just tell me a little about poly use. Would you be concerned that poly use would be up if we have more marijuana on the streets? And how particular of a problem is that lately?
It's a huge concern. The poly use, especially around the driving, we're seeing more and more fatals. And with these fatals, the availability of quote unquote legal marijuana and the use along with a few or 3 or 4 beers or a couple beers or alcohol or any of that, in addition to any other drugs they may ingest, is just making them more impaired on the roadway, endangering not just themselves, but the other people. And with these one-way crashes, can't see it getting any better.
And so legalizing, if we pass this bill, would be a bad idea.
I think it would be a very bad idea.
Thank you. Dr. Hannon, last call for you.
Last, I'm the only one.
No, there's
Okay.
Pretty close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the last time today. My name is Joe Hannon. I'm here to voice support for HB 75, a bill that represents long overdue progress in cannabis policy and civil rights in New Hampshire. As a person who's been extensively involved with studying cannabis re-legalization, I can say with confidence that prohibition has failed. It has failed to keep cannabis out of the hands of youth, failed to protect public health, and failed to provide justice. Instead, it has fueled unnecessary arrests, racial disparities, and a thriving illicit market. This bill legalizes cannabis for adults 21 and older, a policy that every neighboring state has already adopted. With this bill, we can stop criminalizing adults for personal choices that are safer than alcohol. We can redirect law enforcement resources to more serious issues, and we can begin building a regulatory framework that prioritizes public health and consumer safety and economic opportunity. Opponents have raised concerns about youth access and impaired driving, but these are already issues under prohibition, and legalization gives us tools to better manage them through public education and other protocols. We don't need to undermine it. This is also a civil rights issue. Thousands of New Hampshire residents, disproportionately those from marginalized communities, have faced lasting consequences for cannabis possession, even under decriminalization. Legalization is a way to stop that cycle and acknowledge that past policy was misguided. Let's join the rest of New England and let's legalize responsibly. Vote ought to pass for HB 75. And also, I'd like to comment on something that was said earlier. Not everyone in the medical cannabis program has a caretaker, nor the means to get one. There are a lot of senior citizens, and it's probably one of the biggest concerns with seniors and mental health and just quality of life in general is being alone. So we take people that are already disproportionately affected, and we're going to say that they're unable to get something. And if they're not in the cannabis program for other reasons, because they don't want to potentially incriminate themselves by putting them on a state list or something, even if other people might not see it in law enforcement, it is a government list. And we're not supposed to be in a position where we're meant to incriminate ourselves. Hayes v. U.S. was a Supreme Court case that basically said you can't force someone to basically admit a crime, and like it was a registering a gun offense, I believe. So it was a criminal who wasn't allowed to have a gun, but you can't force someone to do that. This is long overdue. It's been done in other states. Vermont did it before they had any kind of regulatory framework set up and did not have any problems. It's already here. And in no way has prohibition worked in any metric. I challenge anybody in the audience today or anybody listening to list all of the accomplishments that prohibition has had and compare that to the list of all the negative consequences of imprisoning, denying people housing, education, and so forth because they broke a law years ago. This has got to change. And it may not be the perfect way to do it, but I definitely think it's a reasonable first step and it has to be considered.
I'm going to ask you, are you done? I'm sorry.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's fine. I remember
When I stop talking, my wife usually jumps right in, so I'm sorry.
in some of the
Train now.
cannabis commissions of the past, some of the states who have looked at, I remember, it didn't always stay, but at the beginning, more young people than just under 18 even would say it's the stigma is gone if they can use it just like a beer. Youth use usually went up initially when it was a new thing in the youth. Do you see that happening in New Hampshire, that at the under 18 we'll see less of a stigma when it's a legal product out there for over 21? Do you see use going up? Because I remember seeing that in many states.
Use has gone up in some states in certain age groups and has gone down in others. They looked at many states, depending on the studies you look at. I don't have them on hand right now, but I can tell you that most of the studies, the majority of the studies showed no increase in youth under a certain age, meaning teenagers, high school age, middle school age. Young adults have had a slight increase when these initially went through, especially in Colorado and some neighboring states. Those 21 and older in that, late college, early adulthood phase. But you don't have those same individuals drinking alcohol in the same amounts. They may be drinking less. They may not be doing other things. Polydrug use was brought up as a real concern, and I absolutely agree. Polydrug use is a very dangerous thing for people that are using unknown substances and mixing different things. Even if they're known legal substances, it's very dangerous in most cases. But having something that's already legal, hasn't stopped anybody from doing that in this state. Our numbers are not drastically different than other states. The states that have legalized didn't see drastic increases in any metric that was statistically significant that they're looking at. So I don't think that I don't think it's something that we need to worry about with this bill at all. People are going to do it. As far as stigma, and since we brought up stigma, we're in a state that has a giant warehouse-sized liquor store with giant signs on almost every exit I can see. And shopping, there's one in the shopping center in the center of my town. I see one at the main exit when I get to 101. This doesn't do that. This doesn't say, oh, we're the state of New Hampshire. We think it's okay to sell cannabis. So, all of a sudden kids think it's okay. If we want to stop kids from using substances at an early age, maybe we should start there with alcohol. I don't think we should.
Go ahead, Senator.
Do that, but yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. So last term, the Senate actually passed some version of some recreational policy, and I haven't gone through all that process in my head in some time, but my question is, with that policy, that was a recreational policy. If I recall correctly, you did not support that recreational draft.
I didn't, you saying?
Yeah, I'm asking you, I don't recall if you did. I didn't believe you did, but maybe I'm wrong.
I didn't support the state full total control of it, no.
So if I can ask a follow-up, I guess I'm just trying to absorb the testimony. If there's been all these, you testified that there's been disproportional impacts on cannabis prohibition, particularly on, I think you described as marginalized communities. I guess my thought is, I would think whatever this body passed last term would have addressed that. But if that's the reason why we should just allow this bill, House Bill 75 to pass, this just basically legalizes everything without virtually any regulation whatsoever. So I guess what's the justification if it's about the marginalized communities being negatively impacted? Wouldn't any type of legalization policy address that? What's the difference between this? How would this not impact those communities or benefit those communities, but what we passed in the past term, how would that have not had the same impact as this bill?
Just because both forms of legalization would limit that, I don't think it makes this any less valid an argument for this bill. you look at the statistics, they can range between 4, 5, 6%, not percent, 4, 5, or 6 times more people that are minorities getting arrested for these crimes. I believe we had almost around 2,000 criminal arrests for cannabis possession in New Hampshire a year. That's after decrim. So I don't see, and it's not the only reason to do it. There's many reasons, and I know I'm sure we'd all like to go home soon. But as far as civil liberties, personal choice, individual freedom, rights, and weigh that in contrast to all of the negative impacts that have happened from prohibition over the years, it's a no-brainer.
Final question for me. So, all the states you've looked at and I've looked at, does use go up when it becomes legal?
It varies. And overall, I don't have a specific number, but I can get you those numbers if you'd like.
I believe it usually does, especially the first year or two when it's a new thing.
Yeah, after alcohol prohibition was repealed, drinking went way up. But you have that when you say you can't have this because you're not responsible enough adults and I'm the government. And all of a sudden we say, okay, you can have what you want. People go, oh, like my son, when I get his driver's license, I never saw him for 6 months. He was gone, anyway.
So if use goes up, aren't we saying then we're condemning a certain number of more people are going to die and have more increased car accidents in the next couple of years?
No.
Higher use,
I'm
more
sorry.
deaths, more road accidents. No?
The data doesn't show that necessarily at all in other states. There are some studies that show there have been slight increases, but most have not shown that. And the ones that have, they say, oh, we have more instances where we're testing positive for people that have died or have been in a car accident with cannabis, depending on the studies. They are comparing that oftentimes to times for data where they didn't even test it in most people. If they smelled alcohol, that was enough. They didn't test further in most states for many years. So to say that there's increases with cannabis use, there may or may not be, but to conflate the two is, I think, misguided.
Would you believe that I'm the other way? When I was young, everyone on my basketball team was smoking. I didn't. And it was because I didn't want to break the law. Had it been legal, me and a lot of other people would have tried it. So I just think we're going to foster on the next generation more experimentation with drugs and leading to more problems. Senator Abbas?
Well, this will give you the chance to try it. I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around the idea of the statistics. Those states, I think they had a recreational policy, right? So if there's a store that someone walks into and buys it. This is different. I think this just makes it allowed everywhere. I don't think there's even any possession limits at all. And I can, yeah. So I think for this, I mean, is there a study from any state that just legalized cannabis without any recreational policy or oversight whatsoever by the state?
I believe Vermont did. I have to check, but I know that's happened at least once. I don't know of the studies offhand, but I can find some if you'd like.
If you can provide that to the committee, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Hannon. Seeing no other questions, you have a great day. Does anyone else wish to testify on this bill? Making sure. Seeing none. Thank you all. And the hearing is adjourned.
I think you're gonna bang it again. One more.
We're not exactly anything for this.